Hi guys, welcome to Passport to Self. I'm your co-host Ada.
This is Bam Bam, and I am Luar, and we're here to explore what it means to take up space. In today's episode, we discuss the physicality of space.
How does it feel to be in our bodies, to navigate the world based on how we look, based on the identities that we carry?
Are you ready to take up space with us?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
You ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. We are here.
We're here.
We made it.
You made it. Yes, you made it. It's been a rough 24 hours.
It's been a rough 24 hours.
But we're here. We're alive. I'm very grateful to be here. I'm very grateful with life.
Same.
So,
all things considering, I'm actually very grateful.
yeah.
So what are we talking about today?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I think we're bringing this question about taking up space into the physicality aspect. Because taking up space really does take so many forms, right? That's why we're making a whole podcast about it. And it's been so fascinating so far, for me at least. I think for us, hopefully for the listeners too. And I think the physicality almost, to me, when we first kind of came up with it, sounded too literal. But as we've kind of unpacked what that looks like in our lived reality, I've been realizing, whoa, like that is such a big aspect of then our internal experience, right? And there's so many things to unpack. So let's get right into it, because it's probably way too much for even one episode. So what comes up for you when we think about the physicality of space, whether it's gender, race, ability, I don't know, anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah. So when I think about the physicality of space in my identities, I would say that my Asian and Chinese identity is something that I'm always very conscious of as I navigate through space. Same as being a woman navigating through space at the simplest level is, you know, if you're a woman at night walking home alone, I mean, you probably navigate very differently or feel energetically very differently than if you were with friends doing the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But probably what feels most resonant for me right now is the physicality of being an Asian person in a country that isn't Asian and in a country that isn't my home. I mean, just as I think I shared with you off camera earlier today, but it was very funny. I went to a swim workshop yesterday and befriended this older woman who was Mexican. And she and I shared a very similar story as to why we both decided to go to the swim workshop. We're conversing in Spanish. And then out of the blue, she asks me, so what other languages do you speak? And I told her, I speak English and Chinese. And she goes, oh, okay. And then out of nowhere, she goes like, oh, well, so I was just in Japan recently. And like, how are these things? Da, 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 da. I don't even know like exactly what she said, but my like eyes glazed over. And I'm like, she did not just ask me about the Japanese language. And I know you know this. I studied linguistics. I generally have an interest in languages. I do actually have a decent grasp of the Japanese system, but I actually genuinely do not speak Japanese, for the record. And I remember telling her, I don't understand Japanese. She goes, but the symbols, they're similar. And I was like, I'm Chinese. I'm not Japanese. I don't know what to tell you. And then she just kind of stopped right there. But, you know, this is one example of many common examples that I get all the time because I operate and navigate in Mexico as an Asian passing person.
Not only in Mexico, you navigate in this body.
Yeah, 100%.
This physicality which comes with perceived assumptions.
Yeah, exactly. Like people jump to conclusions right away, or people just want to put you in a box that they understand, right? I mean, the most common question, we might have, you know, spoken about it in the first episode, you know, the question of where you're from. Like, people are never satisfied with the answer I give them because of how I look, right? And so with this body that I carry, people just have so many assumptions about it. And so it has influenced how I navigate and how I respond. I have gotten better at accepting and tolerating, however you want to call it, the questions that I receive, but it doesn't make it any different, right? So yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because there is the triggering aspect of what it triggers in us, I think, which probably speaks to our own set of biases and beliefs and pain points.
Yeah.
Because if we take it back a minute to our childhood, there's probably like moments where this topic becomes a wound.
Yeah.
And I say this because when we are born, we are like born into our physical body as this vehicle of existence. And we don't really question it or think about what we look like. I feel like, I mean, at least for me, if I think about my consciousness, I think I start becoming conscious of aspects of my look because of other people's comments. There are things like I never really considered about looks. Or maybe I've also come with assumptions to spaces about other people, but also super unconsciously because I wasn't at the time questioning all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with time, it has become a topic that is not neutral. It's a baggage. It has this like negative or positive like inclinations of whether you enjoy the undesired attention in certain spaces or whether it creates a sense of not feeling safe to receive undesired attention or to be assumed or associated with a certain baggage of things, right? Because when you speak about your look as something that people associate culturally, there is that baggage. Plus, there is the cultural baggage of being American on top of that. Like when people hear you, which is also part of physicality, is what you sound like when you speak. As I was having brunch earlier, I was sitting at a cafe and 2 tables next to me were like a bunch of American friends, you know, and they were speaking so loudly in English. And obviously that's me. I mean, I'm not American.
No, you're not alone in thinking that.
But that's me when I'm chit-chatting with a friend at a table in English in Mexico and we really stand out. And several people, because I was sitting out in the street, came and asked for money or whatever. And I was asked if I speak Spanish. And it really ticked something for me. Not that this has never happened before, but there was a sense of extra awareness today because I was this time not in that context of being with a friend who is English speaker and we were speaking, like that would be you and me, right? Speaking in English, even though we both speak Spanish fluently and we could totally just be chatting in Spanish. But we do that when there's a third company involved and the language to be speaking is Spanish. But when it's just the two of us, we naturally tend to English. But I think that, yeah, sound is also part of the physicality of space. Like I sitting there had my whole reign of baggage of narratives about this group of people, right? But also part of me just noticed how by association, I'm this white woman, I'm sitting relatively near to these loud speaking group of people in English. And now even more so, I'm feeling like everybody is kind of like, hey, do you speak Spanish?
It's funny you say that, especially being American in Mexico.
Oh.
I do feel like it has guided how I carry myself in spaces here, in the sense that I have intentionally learned the language to be fluent. I would say that I have adapted to a good portion of the customs here. For example, in America, people do not do the niceties of like, hey, how are you? Like,
Really?
no, it's very like transactional oftentimes. And here it's almost rude if you don't. In America, it's like if you do, cool. If you don't, also cool. Like it's not expected. But here it is like a disrespect or a lack of courtesy.
Especially texting.
Yeah, exactly. So, texting is like a whole other can of worms. No. You cannot start.
Sorry.
And so that's kind of what I mean as an American or just as a foreigner.
Yeah.
I'm adapting, but also I'm adapting. Yeah, I make those adjustments, but I'm also aware to be a little less blatantly American, which is different from like trying to be more Mexican and Mexican in your behaviors, but to be less American.
Tone it down.
Yeah, because I can be that loud American sometimes.
Yeah.
Guilty.
Whatchamacallit?
You remind me how American I am sometimes. Because I like to think in my head, oh, I'm not that American. And then you're like, no, you're American.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I really do try to be mindful of that most of the time. I think sometimes when I'm with close friends, I might get a little too comfortable.
What'd you say yesterday? Like, fuck. Oh, I'm gonna fuck some ramen.
What did I say? I said I could
fuck some ramen.
I could fuck with some ramen. Yeah, I could fuck up some ramen. That's
fuck up some ramen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was like extra violent. I was like, wow. Language is a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. But in my head, like in that specific example, it was to communicate how hungry I was.
Yeah.
You know?
I know. But it was very American for me, for my ears, because again, people forget this because
you speak so perfectly.
English has an American intonation, even though where I've spent the majority of my life in an English-speaking country has been England. So it's just weirdly
I've never spent time in America.
Never. I barely, even as a tourist, I've been to the US so few times to so few places. Yeah. Anyway, I feel like the whole topic of how we sound, we kind of went on a long tangent there, but I think there's so many other aspects in terms of the actual physicality of space, body, gender. And I feel like you started sharing some really beautiful points about like assumptions and the vehicle that you carry that is not only physical, right? It's also ancestral. Like there's so much more to it. But one thing is to be loving with our culture and our inheritance and our lineage. And another thing is for other people to make a whole baggage of assumptions about us when we haven't really had a chance to be known for who we are underneath the layers of perception and underneath the layers of what is appearance, right? I mean, I can relate, I think in my own way, very different to you, absolutely. And I think that, white supremacy is fucking real. And I live a lot of privileges that I've been unaware about as well, speaking of the physicality of space. Like what has helped me become aware of all of this is my friends of other like cultures and races and colors speaking out about the systematic racism, the personal racism, like all the experiences. That has really been what's opened my mind and my sensitivity and my consciousness to like, whoa, I'm very aware of that now. So for me and my values, really listening to people when they share how they experience space has been like a sense of responsibility to how I want to show up in the world. And also like how I show love. Like it's my love language, to want people to feel seen and taken care of in a way. Probably because that's my pain point too. So even as a filmmaker, as a photographer, as someone who is telling stories and looking at the world and then manipulating that by editing and crafting a whole story, I think about these things all the time. I'm very, very conscious of like, oh, is this like a room full of white people? And like, where are the minority voices? What would representation look like when I tell this story? Am I bullshitting the representation too? Like trying to make it look more inclusive than maybe it was. But
have you been asked to do that before?
I've never been asked to do that, but I'm just noticing how my awareness of this as an issue is impacting how I'm looking at the world, right? And it's true about gender too, by the way, and we can unpack gender in a minute, but thinking of this as a storyteller has been really important for me because I have become aware, especially over the last, 7, 8 years, more and more so, thanks to the movements that have been speaking up of the importance of representation and visibility and what it means to be seen through the stories in this world, And I've become aware of that because of the feminist movement and because of my experience in, woman's body in this world. But thanks to that experience and thanks to becoming aware of it, it has come hand in hand with understanding representation and visibility overall, Yeah, it's something that is on my mind a lot. And it's not only when I tell stories, it's also when I enter a room, right?
Yeah.
So in Mexico, that looks a certain way in certain spaces. When I have been in the US, well, one time in particular, me and my group of friends from film school were traveling together and we are a bunch of like mostly white kids. Like there's some of us are mixed race, but like we are overall more white looking as a group. And we love music and we love to party and we love to dance and we love Black music. And we went in New Orleans we went to many parties in New Orleans, but there was one particular day where a friend like looked up a place like, oh, this looks like a good party. And we arrive and it was a Black party. Like we were the only white people there. And it was the first time, I think, in my life that I entered a room and had this like, whoa, this must be what it feels like in a lot of the contexts that I've lived in majority white spaces, to be a Black person or a brown person or an Asian person in that room. And to really feel like nobody here looks like me,
I definitely feel the person that's different from the rest of the room on several occasions. But yeah, like when I first came here to Mexico, I really like stood out. And it's been interesting to see over the course of these last couple of years, now that there has been a larger wave of Asian immigrants, I don't get the same looks anymore.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, less so. I think if anything, what they're more surprised by is how I look and the fact that I speak Spanish. Right? So they're more accustomed now, they being, Mexican,
General
population. But when I start speaking in Spanish, it's like, whoa, like their mind cannot compute,
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I am having rather in-depth conversations and I can communicate myself very well. And so that's been like an interesting transition or observation that I've seen over the course of my time here.
Also because when you arrived, you didn't speak Spanish fluently. Am I wrong?
No, it was quite broken, honestly.
Yeah. So it's also been that way.
I think it's that. But I also think, back in the day, I remember very vividly. It was honestly very endearing. I was at the Ángel de la Independencia, and I was with my ex-partner at the time, who's actually like low-key famous. But what was interesting was this kid comes up to us, and I thought he wanted to take a photo of my ex.
Ah. Oh.
But he actually wanted to take a photo of me.
Oh my God.
And he goes, hey, like, I'm taking a class where he's learning about countries. He was like, I just learned about China.
Oh.
Do you mind if I, and I think it was part of his assignment to, take photos of people or whatever. He's like, do you mind if I take a photo with you? And it was so sweet. And his father was like standing there, like very patient, and like very like, trying to mediate the situation if anything went bad. And I was like, of course, like I'm happy to. And so I took a photo, and it's just really, really funny because like here I thought it was him that they wanted to take a photo of, and it was me. And I feel like
At least he didn't think you're Japanese. So
I know, I was so yeah, how I navigate as an Asian person does influence my life all the time. Straight up.
Yeah.
But there are times where I do, in a weird way, like being the only Asian person in the room. You know what I mean?
Like, can you share a bit more? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so like in America, when I grew up, I hated being like the only Asian person because I wanted to blend in.
Yeah, like you were the only Asian kid in your class.
It was about not being like the rest. The rest being primarily white, Black, Latinos.
Yeah.
There were very few Asians. There were maybe like 5.
No visible representation of people like you.
Not at all. Not at all. And the Asian people that were there, they were like Indians and Filipinos, and like they don't look like me, So to go from that to then being in Asia, it was a very interesting transition where I was blending in. Like I was one of many Asian people, but yet I still felt different because regardless of my physical looks, on the inside, I did take up space very differently because I was American and I didn't speak the language the way they spoke it, and the values that I have didn't align or didn't overlap with theirs. Like I almost felt, even though I physically looked just like them or more closely like them than ever in my life at that point, on the inside, I felt so different. And that translated on the outside,
Yeah.
And I thought that was such an interesting thing. So much so that in a certain sense, I actually didn't enjoy it. I didn't feel seen. In another way, I didn't fit in.
In what ways did that kind of show up?
There's actually several instances across gender and across my physical, ethnic look. So one, when I was in Hong Kong, so my family's Fujianese, and a bunch of them migrated to Hong Kong, which my parents also did, and then eventually left for America. But I still have family there, right? So I was visiting them, and I was solo traveling, right? Like even though I was with them, I was like doing my own thing. And I don't speak Cantonese fluently. I like to say I'm fluent in dim sum Cantonese. So I can order things when I eat dim sum, but like beyond that, like, ooh, it's a bit hard, a bit dodgy. And I remember just trying to like go to these stores and do things and ask things, and I would ask in English. And they would respond to me in Cantonese. They would refuse to speak to me in English because there was this expectation, because of how I looked,
Yes,
that you speak in your tongue, lady, right? But then I would see my friend who lived in Hong Kong at the time, and he's white, but he's fluent in Mandarin now, not fluent in Cantonese. But like they would immediately talk to him in English without like no issue. It brought a sense of shame, to be honest with you. Like, and that's, I think, a good chunk of what motivated me to learn these other Chinese languages. Because again, Fujianese as a language, it's very rare. It's not. He's gotta do what he's gotta do. So.
Hey, you're on camera, buddy. Talking about the physicality, taking up space. See, like humans are so funny.
Yeah.
Like a dog is not thinking about any of that.
Not at all.
We are carrying so much stories. It's all storytelling. It's all narratives. It's narratives about where we're from and what we look like and all these things and our gender. And it's like, like we are so far away from just being present
Just being
in our
yourself.
existence.
It's like, if I want to lick myself, I'm gonna lick myself.
Yeah,
you
what
know?
do you mean I'm on camera?
But like, it's super interesting because being Chinese American comes with a whole lot of baggage in and of itself. Like, you're not Chinese enough, you're not American enough. And being Chinese, in my case, was like a weird slice of Chinese. And I used to think that I wasn't Chinese enough, even though the Chinese that I am is more than enough. I have enough. But so much of my life growing up, I thought that even when I was Chinese, I wasn't enough. And even when I was American, I wasn't enough. So much so that in college, I strove to learn Mandarin, and I studied abroad, and I was very adamant. Now I've lost a lot of it because I don't practice it anymore. But these experiences of how people look at me and how people assume things of me because of how I look literally drove me to make certain decisions in my life, like learn Mandarin, like travel abroad and try to connect with my culture. And it took a lot of work for me to come to this realization of you can work as hard as you want, but operating off of this position of you are not enough, it will never benefit you. It will never make you feel better about yourself. You are enough. You are just a product of how you grew up. And the truth is you grew up in America to Chinese parents who don't really speak English, and boom, you were created. And my parents don't speak Mandarin to me. So how was I expected to really learn Mandarin? No, they don't speak Mandarin to me.
Yeah.
They
Fujianese, yes. Right?
Yes, Fujianese, yes. But they're so different.
Yeah.
That it's if you speak Spanish and you're trying to learn Romanian.
Yeah.
It's just, they're similar.
Yeah.
But you have to work for it.
Great example.
Yeah. And so, yeah,
awesome. Yeah. It's wow, that really makes sense.
Yeah, it's just oh yeah, there's some similarities, but it's you really have to work for it. There has to be intention behind it. So yeah, I mean, that's something that has, really defined who I am, this physicality that I carry and the physicality that people put upon me really influenced a lot of decisions I've made in my life. And, as my second story, there was a period in my life that I operated and navigated as a boy, as a man.
I was thinking the whole time, I was I hope she gets
I completely forgot about it.
Tell everybody.
So yeah, there was a whole 6 months of my life where I was navigating as a man. So just for context, I had blonde hair, and then I got sick of my blonde hair, got sick of America, and I decided to just go and travel.
Yeah.
And in that process, I decided to cut off the remaining blonde hair that I had, and I was left with really short, boyish hair, black hair. While I was in my era of trying to be a professional photographer full time, I landed this gig with Doctors Without Borders in India, which is for an aspiring documentary photographer, it was my dream come true. And so I was wearing black, there's photos somewhere on the internet of me like this, boyish hair, wearing baggy black clothes. I had these really squarish glasses. I literally looked like a young Asian boy. And for those who haven't been to India, it's a very conservative society. So as a woman, you don't really show your skin, even as a man, rather. And you don't see people wearing shorts. I never wore tight clothes, except one time, which I'll get into shortly. I just never wore anything revealing. And so in New Delhi, they have a metro station, and there is a security line that you have to go through in the metro. Now, me as a new person, the subway that I know is New York. There's no security line. You just go for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for the first few days, I get no comments, and they're properly patting me down, I'm okay, they're really patting me down. So then I'm doing this for a week. And then one day, this guy, a security guard, comes, looks at me differently. He goes, "Ma'am, are you a woman?" And I like didn't know how to react. And then I, in a really gruff voice, like the gruffest that I could, I said, no. And I just like kept walking because I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my gosh. And then afterwards, I went back the next day and I noticed that there was a female line, but it doesn't look like your standard security line because there's like a black booth with a curtain and it just doesn't look like your standard line, you know? In any case, yeah, that was a whole era. And the reason why I did it was out of feeling safe. Like I didn't want to receive unwanted attention, you know? And it made me feel like I could just navigate more discreetly so that I could do my job and like take photos and not be noticed and all these things, right? I loved it because it allowed me to do my job. But in doing so, in this act of being invisible, I kind of like either subconsciously or unconsciously dressed like a man. I never would have said to a friend, oh yeah, I'm navigating as a boy right now.
You weren't doing it consciously.
No, I was consciously dressing more baggy and more loose clothing. But I never in my head thought that the world perceived me as a man.
Whoa.
It was the world that told me that I looked and was passing as a man. In my head, I was just dressing to be safe. Because fast forward to this one day, after many months of dressing like a boy, there was a day where I just wanted to dress up and wear something nice. And in my head, to dress nice and to dress as a female, like as a woman, was to wear skin tight like clothes. And I'll never forget what I wore. I wore skinny jeans with a black American Apparel top, and I had red lipstick.
Wow.
And oh my God.
That sounds hot.
Yeah, but like not in New Delhi. Like I got so much unwanted attention. Like the men were just staring like very uncomfortably long. It was like honestly super uncomfortable. And I remember walking through a park and a guy was kind of stalking me for like 10, 15 minutes. And I had to like tell him to go off in Hindi, the little Hindi that I knew. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was like really, really low-key disturbing.
Especially after passing as a boy for so long.
Yeah, where I never got any special attention, like at all. I mean, yeah, I was Asian, but honestly, if people didn't look really closely, like I would just kind of blend in, you know, like why would they want to talk to, I don't know, a tiny little Asian boy? And so, you know, like I really was like not trying to like bring attention to myself. And the one day that I did, it was like, oh my God, too much. And it's really interesting because it's like, I did this for me, and yet how the world perceived me and how the world made me feel like I shouldn't take up space was super like interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to take up space, but in a really like sincere way. But the way that they then imposed on me and say, oh, you're taking too much space, and that's why we're like staring at you, was, yeah, something I'll never forget.
I relate so much with everything you've been sharing. And I love where you've taken this conversation, because I feel like these are the kind of like really personal experiences that for the listeners, I don't know, but even just for me hearing you, it's like, it makes you feel seen just knowing that other people experience all of this. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's so valuable, you know, to know what all the different layers of dealing with the physicality of space and taking up space, both culturally as well as in terms of gender. I think culturally it was interesting because as I was listening to you, I was so impressed by how much it resonated. Because when you took it into this very core wound of not feeling enough, which I think a lot of us share.
Oh, yeah.
I've never really felt like I belong anywhere, regardless to how it was a space full of other white people or full of other white Jewish people, you know? Mm-hmm. So for me, there's always been a lineage thing in terms of like fear of anti-Semitism and the kind of like narratives I grew up with that made me relate with spaces with a certain lens of fear around my lineage and my identity when we were in majorly non-Jewish environment, which has been the majority of my life. And in the period of my life where I did live in Israel, I also never felt like I belonged because I was that girl that like grew up moving around and politically always had this very different view of what's going on from everybody around me. And the bottom line is like, I really related with that when you said like, I've never been like Chinese enough or American enough. And I was like, yeah, regardless to the space where you dropped me, there was always this feeling of not enoughness, of not belonging enough for whatever reason. And again, I mean, taking it back to my way of looking at the world now as the mirror, I mean, it's also you're carrying those narratives in you. So that's the reality that you're going to be experiencing, right? But the amount of situations that I've been to that reminded me of what you shared, where I felt so much shame. So yeah, in terms of gender, when we speak about the physicality of space, being in the body of a woman, for me personally, is something that I have spent a lot of time thinking about because I grew up with a lot of ideas at home about body and image because of narratives that my parents have about beauty, about aesthetics, about making an impression, how you dress up. Also, a lot of narratives around the feminine body, whether it's been the way my father reacts to women in the space and the commentary at home later. Oh, she was really beautiful. Like putting an importance always on the appearance of the woman. And with the man, you would never even mention that. You would mention his studies or how intelligent he is or whatever. And from the other aspect, my mom has always been on diets. Like there's always been an issue with her body image in terms of me growing up around that kind of conversation. I think it was very unconscious in that they didn't know that their narratives are impacting how I view the world and how I view myself, but they have. And those narratives that my mom was sharing about how her body got destroyed or ruined after giving birth to me. I'm the firstborn. So that before and after for my mom was always something she put a lot of attention on. So for me, from a very young age, there was this like negative connotation around, first of all, the body changing, which is natural, not to mention if you're giving birth, right? Yeah. But it took me so long to start unpacking that, right? It was like that had a negative way of associating in my brain. That and weight, like weight as this negative thing that makes you less attractive or less desirable. And subconsciously, I didn't know this, but I grew up both from these more personal kind of family aspects, as well as I think general society conditioning and magazines and television and media, etc., with a lot of ideas about my value as a being completely associated to, first of all, my appearance, and second of all, men's validation of that appearance. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize how much that was a big factor in how I take up space in the world for a very long time. And there are so many layers to that. I mean, I could speak about it for hours, but for me, there is a before and after me too, in terms of how I started understanding the world I live in and my body. The non-binary conversation wasn't as present at the time, but I used to identify more non-binary.
Oh.
Because, yeah, I had this weird association with being in the body of a woman. I was a filmmaker. I was like sportsy. I always had a lot of male friends. I was always the best friend of all the boys in all the classes that I, like all the schools. And there was some level of unconscious rejection to being in the body of a woman. And I also grew up hearing a lot of narratives around me that didn't come from home. I remember one time in high school, a boy that I was somewhat interested in, he said something like, there are no genius, really successful women. And I remember him saying that and me not answering and just sitting with it and literally being like, is that true?
Yeah.
But that's the kind of education, both in school and society, that we grew up with. Like, I never learned about a female filmmaker
Yeah.
in the many years of film studies. I started studying film since like first year of high school. So my heroes were all men. This is really weird, but I completely blocked out this memory and it's coming out now that we speak about it. When I was creating my graduation film for film school, it was a story about a young woman my age who doesn't know who her father is and goes on this quest to looking for a father. One of the details of this character was she had this cork board in her room, and it was all images of men she admires. It was like this symbolism of the absent male figure in her life. You know, if you think about it, that cork board of these inspiring figures, it was my inspirational figures. You know, it was the people I looked up to. At the time, if you had asked me what like female artists you admire, musicians, filmmakers, or not artists, whatever, like geniuses, psychologists, whatever, I would not know one name to come up with. I bet you.
Wow.
And so I think there is that aspect of the conditioning. And I think in the body aspect, that started becoming more evident post Me Too, because reclaiming me as a woman became important for me. So before, there was almost this unconscious rejection, and I just used to say like, yeah, I don't know if I identify as a woman. I was obviously always associated as a woman and as a heterosexual woman. Like, people always assumed these things about me, and that's how I navigated in life, you know. But I didn't have this connection to womanhood. And post Me Too, it started becoming something intentional for me to reconnect with. And because of the sisterhood that was born in that time through having those conversations, because I suddenly started understanding a lot of things about myself. I discovered a history of sexual abuse in my feminine lineage in the family. I understood things that had happened to me as sexual harassment or some form of violation that I didn't understand that was what it was before.
Yeah.
And as I started reclaiming my body as an act of self-empowerment and rediscovering what it means to be in my skin and how I want to associate in this body, I started taking certain actions. Like, I stopped wearing bras, right? Like, things like that. And those things created certain reactions in my environment. A specific memory that for me sits really strong was circa 2019. I had broken up from my first very long relationship, And I was single for the first time in my adult life, and I was starting to get more confident in my skin and my looks, and how I dress was less like hiding. I started to enjoy my femininity and that taking up space of in that sense. And people started commenting more on like, you look really hot, you look really good. Like I started getting reactions that before I was so hiding, and I had so much rejection to my looks and such a toxic identification with that. And I also grew up with so much pressure at home, thinking that like how people look is so important, that there was so much inner struggle around my looks. And so when I started receiving that kind of attention of like, oh, you're attractive, as a single woman as well, because it's a different kind of attention than when I'm always like with a boyfriend around, right? Suddenly I started to also associate with the space in a different way. So sometimes it would generate some fear, but now it was more about like playing around with that. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to take this fear and go hide. It was like, okay, but maybe by showing up like this, I'm giving permission to other people to show up like this. And maybe I don't need to hide. And in this workspaces, right, as a filmmaker, like the amount of times I cannot tell you that a client just assumed that I'm going to be a man because I'm a filmmaker. Like they hired me without meeting me in person. And I show up and I was like, oh, I thought you were a man because I'm a filmmaker. And filmmaker are men, apparently, which is obviously not true. And there's so much more to unpack there. But where I was heading with this is this really specific memory that I wanted to share, which was I was gonna go to a family thing, and it was like a Jewish holiday where we wear white. And I was wearing a specific shirt that was white, and this is really nice. And when my mom saw me dressed like ready to go, her reaction, bear in mind, I'm like now at that point in time, I'm 26, 27, right? I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not a teenager anymore. And my mom says, oh, you're too sexy. And like, my tone of voice doesn't allow to come across, but the way it was said had such a negative connotation in how I received it. Like, I am taking too much space. And it was so painful, that moment, that I ended up not going to the family gathering.
Wow.
And I couldn't even express it to her. There wasn't even like a proper communication around it. But to me, it was like, okay, so I've been hiding my whole life, making myself so small to avoid danger of attention or to be perceived a certain way. And now I'm growing into my skin, and now I'm too much. And for me, this particular moment, I associated so much with like a before and after personally, because at that moment I was able to observe that happening and to start asking questions around it for myself, you know, regardless to my mom and her experience and her narratives. For me, it was like, whoa, this was really painful. Like, I don't get to win. I don't get to be just in my skin how I feel good. I'm either too sexy or I am not enough for society because no one's, or especially men, are not validating my existence because I'm not sexy, let's say, right? Like if we want to simplify it to really superficial terms. And that till today, I mean, I'm like in a really different place with all of this today, but it's something that I will never forget. And it was a really important moment. It really reminds me of this amazing monologue in the Barbie movie where America Ferrera says that monologue. I don't know if you've watched it, but
I know.
for people who haven't watched it, first of all, watch it. But that particular monologue, it was like this: we can never win. You're either too much or you're not enough. And that's this raw experience of being a woman in the patriarchal system that I felt so identified with when I watched the movie. I burst into tears so hard in that monologue because that was exactly how I felt my whole life. And that particular memory about my mom's comment, it's also particularly interesting that these are experiences mirrored by the women in our life, by the women that bring us up, right? I'm not even having a conversation here about the commentaries my exes used to make to me, or men in my life, or the catcalling, or the harassment. Like, forget that. How we are seeing each other as well. That's why it's about the patriarchal system. It's not a gender game. It's not them against us. And I definitely don't believe any of that anymore today. If at any point in my feminist journey, I thought in those binaries more. But yeah, that experience was this pinnacle moment of that arriving into my consciousness. The fact that I've been experiencing life this way and starting to deconstruct that. And that's been for me personally a big part of the physicality of taking up space. Yeah, it really goes to show, that whole narrative, especially around safety. You said the word, it's not safe, and how people dress. And it's interesting because we really grow up believing this story about how if we hear a story of a woman that got kidnapped or raped walking somewhere on her own, the first question is, what was she wearing? Mm-hmm. It's this victim blaming of, it must have been her fault. She probably showed too much skin. Even the way you described, for me, being in my feminine was wearing tight. Why tight? Because it's showing your figure, right? Unconsciously, just hearing you now, I was like, yeah. Also for me, this coming into my skin as a woman, a big element of that is how I dress, how much I show. And when we say how much I show, it's how much I show my figure. Because it's almost like if I wasn't to show my figure, maybe no one would pay attention to the fact that I'm a woman, even though I don't have my hair cut short. So it's so interesting psychologically how these narratives play in. And I very much remember that I used to think as well in that same way that most of us have been conditioned to think around how you dress puts you in danger or not.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I had that whole narrative twisted, like where I was like, wait, what? It's not that. Like the fucked up shit is not how we dress. It's the fact that whether or not we dress a certain way puts us in danger in the first place. Like what we should be looking at is, why is that dynamic even happening? Not what was she wearing? What was she wearing is not inherently dangerous or unsafe. Me choosing to express myself in a certain way, wearing a bra, not wearing a bra, showing my skin, not showing my skin, none of that is inherently unsafe. The narrative is that it's unsafe because someone might do something to me because I'm a woman, like it's my fault. That's such a fucked up way of like twisting who's responsible in the dynamic.
Yeah.
Like why in the first place are we normalizing that people would violate a woman's personal space or agency over her body and what she consensually wants to do or not, just because she exists in the space in a female body. Mm-hmm. And so I really remember the moment where I started understanding this. And then when I started dating one of my boyfriends, I remember he once said something about that to the extent of, oh, it's the woman's fault if she's wearing something. And I could tell he wasn't even questioning it. It's because I knew that in that moment that I used to think like that not long ago. So I remember finding myself essentially educating him, and I remember him like literally being like, whoa, like I've never thought about it that way, It's crazy how our social conditioning really informs how we judge others, how we perceive others, our assumptions about others, but also how safe we feel in our bodies and to take up space. And we're still living this like existence of reality in a different way just because of our appearance, our race, our gender, and what we carry. So yeah, it's fascinating. It's endless. I mean, it's like you don't think about it if you are in the privileged position of the system, depending on your privilege in that relative context, unless you are listening to other people's stories and have been expanding your consciousness around it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
That's what comes to mind.
Yeah, what you shared really resonated because there's been so many times in my life where my mom is the one telling me what I should and shouldn't do. And it's exactly how you said it.
In terms of like aesthetics and looks and how we take up space physically as women in society, right? Like,
yeah,
really inherited a lot of narratives there from our mother figures.
Yes, 100%.
And from our father figures in their ways, but yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is a good time to wrap up. Any lasting thoughts on your end?
I think this was a lot to unpack. There's definitely more. I think there's infinite stories for both of us, but nothing is more poignant than our personal experience of how we take up space physically. And that's gonna show up really different for people because of how society has systematically convinced us that there are races, right? Like we're all Homo sapiens. So this is like a larger conversation in terms of why racism and classism even exist. It's a whole psychological manipulation of the collective for the sake of a supremacy, for the sake of certain people benefiting off other people's oppression.
Yeah.
And Michaela Loach, It's Not That Radical book has taught me a lot about that. And I'm very grateful. It's one of my favorite references. So name dropping here on purpose. And I highly recommend this for everybody. And yeah, again, I think for me personally, there is the personal aspects and there's also the responsibility as a storyteller and understanding that it matters. And it shaped me growing up to not have female filmmakers. Not that there weren't female filmmakers to look up to. There are, but I'm aware of them now. But to not have been taught about them by my teachers, even by my female teachers, and to not see representation of women on screen or in museums or in all cultural spaces in a way that subconsciously educated my brain to believe that my value is based on my sexuality and whether or not men validate me. It has shaped me growing up so massively. And I can imagine for everybody, I think psychologically, I think it's a social conditioning. I'm just sharing from my personal perspective, but I think we're all impacted by this system. And that really impacts how on a personal level we take up space. So I really enjoyed unpacking this conversation with you, and I'm really grateful for all the personal insights that you have shared in terms of your experience of it, which is so different to mine, and yet I could relate on so many levels, which again brings me back to the thing I say in all the episodes of our oneness and why I love storytelling and I find it so important and so powerful, because this is not to undermine or undervalue that your experience in this society because of the system is going to look different to mine. And I think it's really important that we speak out and we hear these stories and we create spaces to tell these stories. But also it's so beautiful to, at the bottom line, have this shared human experience and just know that I can relate in my own experience and in my own ways.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so important. And I hope for the listeners that, you know, if anything, it just made them feel less alone and more seen, you know.
You know, there's a lot of people and entities that stand to profit from you not feeling that you're enough. And the truth is you are enough. We are enough. You are enough and we are enough, and that's all there is to it. And I hope that the listener, what they take away from this is that, yeah, we are all enough. So, amazing.
Thank you so much. I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening, guys.
We'd love to hear what you're thinking. Please follow us on all of the channels at Passport to Self Podcast.
And remember to tune in for our next episode.
Whoop, 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 whoop.